Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Wells. I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and I talk about games on the internet. Today, we are going to talk about the new core book for Star Trek Adventures, The Klingon Empire. Um, they did this as a new core book instead of as a supplement, in part because they wanted to just absolutely fill it with Klingon information, but also because they wanted to update a couple of rules and things, just minor. It's still fully compatible with all the other stuff. Anyway, Star Trek Adventures, as I say all the time, is my very favorite RPG of the moment, and has been for over a year, which says a lot. Anyway, this new core book is about Klingons, and whereas the first core book is entirely designed to create Starfleet personnel. This one is all about Klingon characters who work with the Klingon Empire and are part of the Klingon, space fleet and all of this stuff. And it's got a lot of really good information. And so while it is a core book, I'm not going to go through the basic mechanics of the game because you can just click over and watch the other uh, core book review that I did, which is actually, I think, my very first review I ever did on this channel. So it's crappy. So maybe I should actually go through it. But anyway, it's part of the 2D20 system, which is, the Modiphius's kind of main in-house system that they use for Conan and they use for um, Infinity, and they use it for all kinds of stuff, and they use it for Star Trek Adventures. The thing I love about that system is that it does create very Star Trekky feeling stories. It enables you as a game master or a player to tell stories that feel like Star Trek instead of just being D&D in space or, whatever other role-playing game. It feels unique, which is an interesting thing to be able to say about a kind of generic system that gets used for a lot of properties. 2D20 gets used for a bunch, but Star Trek Adventures, it has a couple of tweaks here and there, and it all just fits and it works really well. So, anyway, let's take a look inside at what it's got. So, boom, and here we are, Star Trek Adventures. Um, so it's got a map. The map is entirely written in Klingon, making it essentially useless. But that's just the inside cover, so you don't need to worry about it. It's got a huge section about, Klingon Empire first of all, the the history behind it, how they are politically organized, who the Klingons are and what they are like. One thing that I do like about this is let's jump into the character creation system. They use a life path, and I love life path systems. Um, but they have the two types. Now, this was um, a joke in some of the series, and then Enterprise explained it. Basically, the original series Star Trek had this kind of humans with a couple slight alterations kind of makeup, and then the original series movies, starting with Search for Spock, did this new thing. They made the Klingons much more alien, much more different. I mean, they're obviously still mostly human, but they changed everything about their visual look. And the TV shows never really addressed that until Deep Space Nine did their Trouble with Tribbles homage, where they kind of digitally inserted the DS9 characters into the original series episode. And Worf points out some Klingons, and somebody, like, I think it's Miles, says, "Wait, those are Klingons?" And Worf just grumbles and says, "We don't like to talk about it." And it's very funny, haha, and it was wonderful. It's one of the best episodes of Star Trek ever. But it wasn't until Enterprise came along where they actually explained it. And it's actually a really good explanation. And in brief, and this book goes through the whole thing, but in brief, what Enterprise said is that the Klingons, who had, contact with the Federation and with Earth as early as the very first episode of Enterprise, Broken Bow. They had been seeing us and they'd been observing us, and they found our genetic augmentation experiments. You know, people like Khan Noonien Singh from The Wrath of Khan. There were a bunch of these, and it was part of Earth's history in the Star Trek timeline. We've actually already passed, in the year 2020, we've passed by a long time the original Augment Rebellion. But in the Star Trek timeline, what happened is a bunch of genetically augmented super geniuses and super warriors tried to take over the planet, and we eventually got rid of them and shot them into space. And so what Enterprise said is that the Klingons found some of them and found some of the data used to create them and tried to create super Klingons. And it kind of worked, but because it was based on human genetic research, some of the shortcuts that they took in the process created much more human-looking Klingons. And so there are... it actually works really beautifully, and I love it as a way of explaining the continuity without having to change any of the continuity. I mean, it's a little bit of a retcon to go back and say, oh, well, those Klingons that Kirk encountered were actually part of this. You know, it was a crew entirely staffed by, what is this, the Kucha. Instead of by regular Klingons, it was all Kucha Klingons, because there's a little bit of a kind of racial tension going on there, and so they tended to compartmentalize the crews. So yes, it's a little bit of a retcon, but it's a beautiful retcon that actually makes everything work. The book attempts as well, give it credit, to explain why the Discovery Klingons are all freaky and weird, and it can't really explain that because the Discovery Klingons are terrible. But it does its best, give it credit. Anyway, so as you're creating a character, you've got the option between a regular Klingon or the Kucha Klingon, and so on, and it's really cool. Anyway, I really dig it. So let's take a look at some other stuff here. Let's go back to the table of contents. Okay, so you've got the whole history section, the core rules, which, like I said, is essentially identical to the original Federation rulebook. What is different about it actually shows up later on in character development. So let's take a look at that. They've changed the reputation system significantly. And the reputation system as it originally existed in the Federation book absolutely needed some changes. It was not of any use to me as a GM or a player. But this new version of it is done really well. And so, let's see. Let's skip ahead and find the reputation. Here we go. So, every session, every adventure that you undertake in Star Trek Adventures has directives. And here in this book they call them dictates because they're not the Federation. They don't have a prime directive, they have dictates. And so obviously there's the prime directive, which is don't mess with pre-warp civilizations. And then there's other directives, and they can show up. When I looked at the These Are the Voyages adventure supplement that has a bunch of little adventures inside of it, each one of those includes new directives that are things like your directives for this mission are to explore this space, to protect Starfleet technology, to make first contact. They're like the things you're supposed to do. Okay? So anyway, what you have here are these dictates which help inform all of this stuff. So at the end of every adventure, a Klingon character is going to look at all of these things and say, was my mission victorious? Yes or no. Did you positively use one or more of the adventure's dictates? Yes or no. Did you obey the orders given to you by your superiors? Yes or no, etc. And so you're going to go down. These are all the positive things. Everything you say yes to here is going to get you a bonus. And everything you say yes to here in the negative influences is going to get you a penalty. So, was your mission a failure? Yes. Did you challenge one of the adventure's dictates? Yes. Were you disobedient to your superiors? Yes. And I love the flavor that is baked into these. So, like, here in positive influences, did you declare yourself so that your enemies knew who they faced? That is such a Klingon thing. And knowing that there is a mechanical benefit to it means that your players are going to do it more often, which is wonderful. And then down here in the negative influence, did you employ poison? Did you kill those who could not defend themselves or who were significantly weaker than you? Did you seek to undermine your foes before attacking, or attack using stealth, deception, or betrayal? And so the way that this positive and negative influence system works is going to change the way that they play. And players are going to be much more incentivized to actually act Klingon, which is awesome. So then, what we do next, you start with your you start with a target number of 7 plus your reputation, and your reputation default is set at 3. Your record and behavior are unremarkable, neither shameful nor worthy of song. And it can go all the way up to 5, in which you're like the best Klingon ever, or all the way down to 0, in which you're such a worthless piece of garbage that they don't even consider you Klingon anymore. You're like a Ferengi to them. So, you take your 7, and then let's say you're a starting character, so 3. So your target number is 10. You've got a handful of d20s, and you need to roll under a 10. How many times do you need to roll under 10? Well, that's the difficulty. The difficulty of this roll is equal to the number of negative influences you have. So every time you said yes on this list of, looks like 11 or 12 things, 11 things, let's say you said yes to 4 of them because you had a particularly nefarious adventure, well, then you've got to roll under a 10 4 times. Okay? So you get your dice. How many dice do you get? How many times did you say yes up here? Maybe you said yes up here 3 times. So you get 3 dice. Okay? And then you roll all 3 dice. Everything that is under a 10 is a success. Anything that is under your reputation, which is 3, is a crit. That's 2 successes. So it's still possible with 3 dice to get 4 successes. And then you compare it to the difficulty, you count it up. Oops. Every success you get beyond what you need counts as glory. And glory you can cash in to get cool things, like you can improve your reputation, you can make friends with some of the NPCs you met. We'll look at that list in a second. Every shame that you suffer, and shame is you missed, shame is equal to the difficulty number minus what you rolled. So if our difficulty number is 4 and you only rolled 2 successes, you end up with 2 shame. Also, every time you roll a 20, that's an extra shame. And shame also you spend on stuff. I love this whole system. This is really great stuff. So for example here, using glory. Oh, also shame, if you don't spend it yet because you don't want to cash in the penalties, it builds up and makes it more likely that you'll get shame. It essentially increases the complication range of future reputation rolls, which is great. Anyway, so let's say we ended with 2 glory, okay? So what can we do? We can spend glory to gain favor with some of the NPCs that we saw. We can increase our reputation, and you have to spend glory equal to the new rank you want to achieve. So if we started with a reputation of 3 and we want to get to 4, we got to spend 4 glory. So we could save that up over time, and maybe 2 or 3 adventures will have enough glory. You can commend another. If you're the commanding officer, you can do your reputation roll first, and then every glory you get, you can spend to give one of your underlings, one of the other players at the table, an extra d20 on their roll, and they can potentially generate some glory. You can spend glory to give yourself awards, which are things like this. You give yourself the Order of Kalos, or so on and so on. You can increase your status. You can you can elevate yourself to a new social class. You can give yourself a promotion. Um, and you can also improve your house. And we're going to talk about the Klingon houses in a minute, because that's one of my other favorite parts of this system. Um, shame, you also spend. And why would you spend shame? Well, first of all, because you're trying to tell a cool story and you're a good role player. Second of all, because if you don't spend shame, then it increases that complication range, like I said, and future reputation rolls are way more likely to just keep piling on shame. You got to spend it. So you can spend it for basically the opposite stuff. You can spend it to lower your reputation. You can spend it to demote yourself in rank. You can spend it to have an NPC not like you. Um, and this is just a way of think of shame as pressure that is building up and you have to release it before it explodes, right? So you look at this pool of shame, and obviously you don't want any of the penalties that come with it, but it is more dangerous to keep it. So you got to get rid of it. You're like, well, how can I get rid of these 2 shame? Oh, well, this other Klingon captain that we talked to and got some information from, if I spend these 2 shame, he didn't like me. He thought that I ended up looking like an idiot in that conversation, or he thinks that I'm honorless or something. And then you can bleed off some of that shame and create a cool story element with it. I absolutely love this new reputation system. It's phenomenal. Good job, everyone. Now let's take a look at the houses, because that's the other really neat thing that I want to talk about here. Of course, the Klingon houses, if you've watched the Next Generation series, then there's the House of Duras, was a big thing. Worf is part of the House of Moog, and then he eventually gets kind of invited in, adopted into the House of Martok, and Martok became the Chancellor, so that was a really good thing. And I am not finding in my little PDF table of contents what I'm looking for, so we're going to look at the actual book table of contents. House creation. Where are the houses? House creation and development. Oh, I was right next to it. Well then, fine. Okay, so you can be a part of one of the pre-existing houses, and they have all of the information. All of the current great houses, all of the current minor houses, all of the historical great and minor houses that have come and gone throughout the history of Star Trek. But you can also create your own house. And you can do this just for one individual character, or maybe multiple characters in your campaign can all be part of the same house, or maybe just as a game master you want to create a house that is going to apply to as NPCs or as villains for a Federation campaign. However you want to do it, there's really cool rules for building a house. So a Klingon house is going to add a bunch of bonuses, and it's a key part of character creation to figure out which house you come from. And so when you create a house, the first thing you're going to do is, what is the status of your house? Is it old and fallen? Is it old but coming back? Does it have a prestigious history, or is it brand new and eager? So you pick all these things, and each of those will give you bonuses. So if you are old and fallen, characters from this house are vigilant and disciplined. They gain +1 control, +1 insight. Those are 2 of the core traits that you get in this game. You have values, and your house will have a value that then your character will have, or will have a version of, because you come from that house. And then your reputation. If you're from an old fallen house, characters from this house have a starting reputation of 2 rather than the standard 3. And so on. And so there's lots of different things that can happen to you because of your house status. Next up, your house legacy. Are you known in the Empire as leaders, as warriors, as spacefarers, as engineers, etc.? And those are going to change. So if you are warriors, then you have characters from this house have a tradition of martial prowess and add +1 to their security. Then you get to choose a sample focus for the house that, again, applies to everyone who comes from that house. They'll have the focus in hand-to-hand or whatever. And then a talent that will... This isn't something that every character automatically gets. It's something that you can choose if you want. So Ancestral Blade and Trained from Birth are both talents that a character could pick if they come from a house with a legacy as warriors. Now there's also, here's what they are. The Ancestral Blade, and then on the next page, the Trained from Birth. So there's all of that stuff. Next up, what is your temperament like? Are people from your Klingon house typically enthusiastic and active? Are they hot-tempered and ambitious? Are they calm and stoic? So each of these, again, is going to be giving some little attribute bonuses and some discipline bonuses. And you can see now how building a Klingon house is going to create all of this interesting backstory for your character and give you a chance to, really situate yourself within the narrative of the Empire. What I would love to do, I read through this book, I adored every bit of it, and there's, I'm not going to go and show you there's ships, there's lots of Klingon ships in it, there's Klingon weapons, there's Klingon gear, there's advice on how to tell Klingon stories, there's everything you could possibly need to tell a Klingon campaign. What I am very excited to do, and I hope to get a chance to do this soon, is to put together what is essentially like a Klingon Pendragon campaign. By which I mean that everyone in the story, comes from the same house. They're all siblings or cousins or something, and it's one of these old fallen houses, and they're trying to bring glory back. And so they are, going over, and each adventure is a year, and each year they get a chance to do something. This is what Pendragon does. This is what the One Ring does. All of my favorite role-playing games have this kind of long legacy bloodline system built into them. And with Klingons, you could do that and watch as the characters grow up, and they get married, and they have kids, and they go on missions to try to gain glory for their house and try to make it into a great house. And they do all this wonderful stuff, and then maybe a character dies, and their son or their daughter steps in and takes over. You have all of the tools to do that with the way the house system works and the way the reputation system works. I'm so excited to run a Klingon Empire campaign. I can't even tell you. It occurs to me I should show you some ships just to show off that there are the neat ships in here. So a lot of the stuff that you've seen in the different eras of Star Trek are in here. And it gives, of course, all the rules of how ships work, but then it has the actual starship stats, which I'm going to find for you if I can. Where are you? Okay. Oh, it has the whole starship creation system. How do you put together a ship? And this involves, you start with a space frame, and then you give it a mission, outline, essentially. Like if you start with this 22nd century bird of prey, the Von Tauk, what is it going to do? Like, what is it intended to accomplish? And so it's a lot of customization, and there's all these different Klingon ship sizes, up to and including the Negvar, which is the huge battleship that they brought in to Deep Space Nine. Come on, Negvar, where are you? Show us the big giant one. Oh, there's the Vorcha, which is kind of a next-gen era warship right there. And then the Negvar is this one, which is the huge one. These are the massive capital ships that are awesome. Now, let me show you. I said I wasn't going to show you these, and now I'm going to show you these. They do have a lot of other ships. They've got, other Federation ships and Cardassian ships and Ferengi ships and Romulan ships and stats for the ships and stats for the people, so that your Klingons have people they can interact with and fight. One of the things that I really love about the source books for Star Trek Adventures is they've got command, operations, and science division source books, and each one of those splits the types of adventures available down into these very digestible categories, and then explains, what is a diplomacy adventure like, and how would someone from sciences interact with it as opposed to someone from, a command division or something like that. That's not in the core book, but it's in those source books, and it's phenomenal. It's arguably the best part of those source books. What they've done here is, because it was such a good system, and because Klingons are so different than the typical Federation character, they've brought those in. Okay? And so first here you're seeing, like, these are the different kind of archetypal campaigns that you could put together if you wanted to. But then they get into more of this. Or no, they're talking about character creation. Where is it? They've got a huge game mastering section, which is why I'm having trouble finding the awesome thing I wanted to show you. How do you put together an adventure? What is it like? Blah, blah, blah. But then that really cool... here it is. Okay, plot components. Found it. So in the source books, they break them down into red, yellow, and blue plot components, which of course are command, operations, and science division plots. And so they do that here, but they give them their own names because they don't follow the same colors. They're not red, gold, and blue. So this is Duck, and this is red. And so a Duck plot is about diplomacy or matters of honor, conspiracy, obligations to your house, political rivalry, show the flag, or spiritual. These are the command-centered plots. And then it gives a description of what each one is like. And then you've got the same thing over here for the Sud, which is sciences, and then the same thing for Kolom, or Krolom, which is operations. So the amount of information they give you here of what to do and how to play as a Klingon, how to run a Klingon adventure, how to run a Klingon campaign, pages and pages and pages of this very thick book are all just this phenomenal game master information for how you can make your campaign actually feel innately Klingon. And then at the very end, they've got a sample adventure called Disruptors at Dawn that you can run your characters through, and it's a lot of fun. So hooray. In fact, I think they've got multiple ones. Yeah, they've got 3 or 4 mission briefs here. Is it going to tell us? Okay, yeah, there's 3 or 4 Klingon missions. So as core books go, Star Trek Adventures, the Klingon Empire, is one of the best I've seen. And part of that is because they've already got so many other books in the line that they were able to draw from the best and put everything into one book. You've got all the character stuff, all the game master stuff, plenty of adversaries to go up against, actual missions to run through. Everything that would normally be spread across multiple source books is all right here, all in one place. My favorite role-playing game, and this is a phenomenal new book in the line. So, anyway, if you, like me, love Star Trek, then this book is for you. I encourage you to go out, pick this up, look through it, get super excited about running a Klingon campaign, get out your batleth and sharpen it, and play a game. Anyway, thank you for joining me and watching this video. I am Dan Wells, and you are awesome.